I would like to be able to sit and talk to each of you individually for 15 minutes, which is how long this presentation is going to take, so that I could learn from you properly what you want to understand, talk to you about what you care about, and absolutely not talk to you about what you don't care about and not waste your time. And that's kind of what personalisation is trying to solve. It's trying to solve talking to your consumers about what matters to them, enriching the brand, enriching the relationship, and creating a better relationship that creates incremental demand or incremental revenue. And this is kind of what matters in there, okay? So you'll hear a lot of people talking about algorithms, and hear a lot of people talking about data, but an algorithm without data is worthless because the data has to power the algorithm. But actually, an algorithm and data are worthless without identity. So if you don't know who you're communicating to and you don't know what you're saying to them or why, it's very hard to understand whether it's actually worked or not. So there's two sides to that people normally want to talk about with personalisation. One, people want to talk about personalising to more people. So how do I personalise to 100% of my audience? And I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to talk about how Conversant addresses that. But the other side of it is, what is personalisation actually for, and how is personalisation used? And if you do get to the level of communicating one-to-one, what does that communication look like, and what are you trying to do with it? And I think that actually not a lot of people are talking about that, and I'm going to bring that out. If that's not what you're interested in, now is definitely the time to go. No? Okay, fine. So Conversant is actually part of a Fortune 500 business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and every dollar in it is spent on either identifying an individual or getting a personalised message to an individual. And that's a very, very large business to be focused on just one thing. It's store cards, loyalty programs, data, display, affiliate, and on-site as well. And I'm going to be talking about what we do in digital display, because that's the hardest place to solve one-to-one personalisation. It has very unique problems. It has problems with identifying audiences across devices. It has problems with identifying a person at all. Is this fraud? And it has problems with transparency. What is happening at the end of that? Now, Conversant has always worked to three key fundamental beliefs that have allowed us to attack that problem, and we've been working at it for 9 years, so it's a long time to be focused on this. The first fundamental belief is that brands should talk to individuals, so names and addresses. You should be talking to an individual person. That should be an omni-channel ID. It should be a real person, not segments, because segments are inefficient, not email, because email is inefficient, and definitely not cookies, because cookies are very, very inefficient and very rarely indicate who they are. Where Conversant actually eventually solved that is that where we create that ID from, we actually work from our client's transaction file. We don't work from the CRM file, so we use what's in the transaction file, so there's a much bigger scale to start with. The second point is, if you can identify an individual, and you can identify an individual over time, how should you communicate to that individual? And the next fundamental belief is that brands should have proactive, relevant, and ongoing dialogues with consumers. So who has bought something within the last month and then been shown repetitively an ad for that product over the next 2 weeks? Pretty much everybody. Why is that so frustrating? Why is that so annoying? Well, in the first place, that experience is very reactive to something that you've done. Communication between people is proactive. You need to be able to go to somebody and create a new conversation, and then based on what that interaction is, to change that dialogue. So you are actually having a dialogue over time, and you need to be able to do that over time to replicate the effect of a dialogue. And the last fundamental belief is that all marketing should generate a return. So in this belief, there is no such thing as an awareness campaign. There's no such thing as a brand campaign. There's no such thing as a click. There's no such thing as a like. There's only a communication that creates a return, and specifically there's only a communication that creates an incremental return above what you've already got. And what you've already got is brand value. You've got your marketing mix from three months before, and your current marketing mix as well. So you need to understand, what are you doing now that's actually bringing you new value above that? So Conversant has worked to those problems. We haven't solved everything, I'm not claiming that, but when we work with our clients, we can reach 85% of the last 2 years of their customer file. That ID is persistent over 2 years, so we can message somebody ongoing for 2 years, and we can drive incremental return with intention. So the minimum incremental return we generate is 4 to 1. So if you give us £1, we will give you a return of £4. Now, It's not 100% of an audience, but it is a very, very large percentage against what the alternative offers. Now, there's reasons for that, and I'll come on to why that we are able to kind of talk about numbers like that, but why is it currently that that's not the case in the market? What's happening differently? And the first point is that I think that at the moment, personalisation sits within e-commerce teams, and that creates some strengths and it also creates some limitations. So typically e-commerce teams own identity, and the reason they own identity is they own the CRM files within businesses. They also own measurement, so e-commerce teams are very, very good at doing A/B testing to generate small incremental integers of performance over time. One of the problems that the e-commerce teams have, though, is the channels they have to generate that return are very reactive. So typically they'll be looking after email, they might look after SMS, they might control digital retargeting. And the problems with those channels is that whilst they create efficiency, they're not great at creating new demand. It's hard, not impossible, but it's hard to use email to message somebody a brand message. You have to start with product, you have to start with discount to get somebody to open an email. You've got a fixed audience that you're creating more efficient messaging from. It works brilliantly well. 80% of CEOs say that they want more personalisation and it works their business. Over 80% of consumers say that personalisation is something that they like. The last survey I saw said 5% of consumers think they're being personalised to. And I believe the dissonance in that is because what brands are using personalisation for is just to sell more stuff. So really what they're saying is buy over and over again, and they're not deepening the relationship. The other side of that, the other teams that we connect with is the brand comms teams or the marketing comms teams. Now, typically within a business, those teams own scale. They own identifying key audiences for a brand. They own understanding what the values of those audiences are, and they own understanding what the values of the brand are that will connect with those audiences, that will create new demand. The problem with those channels is whilst their channels are proactive and they can go and talk to audiences at scale in a way that's engaging, they can't measure it. TV, it's very difficult to understand who you've shown an ad to. It's very difficult to understand what out of home's done. I saw the CEO of Made.com talking last week, and although he's sold his business, he's still arguing about whether TV does anything or not because they can't measure whether there's been an effect or not. And what we've seen at Conversant over the last 9 years is that actually personalisation, whilst it can be used to create frictionless experience, is actually better used when it's used to create emotional experiences, to take the values of the brand and put them in front of the consumer when they want the brand to be there. So what's actually happening when you're actually communicating with somebody over time? What's happening? So what this is, it's a representation of a brand's audience. Above the line is people who have visited a website or visited a shop but not bought yet. Below the line are people who have actually customers. The centre circle is people who are lower funnel. So somebody who has either visited a site or visited a store within the last 14 days. And currently, most marketing, digital marketing, is concentrated here. And I think most people would agree that most businesses are heavily over-invested in this circle. And the reason is it's measurable. It's measurable on the last click, and it encourages you to put more media there. The outer circle is kind of what is run by the marketing teams typically, who would be running large brand communications campaigns. What we've seen at Conversant is that rather than spending 75%, 80% of your marketing budget on somebody who's just visited the site within the last 2 weeks, is that if you can identify somebody over time, so 1 month from now, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, 4 months from now, you can communicate to the mid-funnel of your own audience in a way that generates new incrementality. And the mid-funnel is highly incremental. It's hard to use email to communicate to somebody that's not engaged with your brand for 6 months because it's hard to talk about brand values through email. SMS is quite a challenging brand. It's quite invasive to start talking about values through. If you can solve identity and you can solve push messaging, you can communicate over time in a way that generates new demand. So, what does that look like? So these are real creatives for one of our clients, but this is a pretend example. So if you can identify an individual, if it's keyed on name and address and anonymized, you can check that against census data so you know age, you know income, you know household, and then you can enrich that with behavioural data from digital data that's real time. Typically what happens is that when somebody buys something online, they're then targeted for about 2 weeks, very, very heavily, very high frequency advertising, which is arguably brand damaging. The alternative, if you know that you're going to communicate to someone over time, is yes, display more product to somebody within the week, maybe 1 or 2 ads, because the best way to overcome buyer's remorse is to buy something else. But that's all you need to do. 3 weeks later, you might want to talk about products, those products that person's bought on models, or showing them what it is about the lifestyle that they bought into. 3 months later, when you've got a new offering coming up or a new season coming out, you should start talking about products that are similar to the ones the person's bought before, things you know that will resonate to create new demand. If you know that discounting works for that person, you should show a relevant discount to that person, but you don't need to show a 50% discount to everybody. If somebody converts on 15%, they should see a 15% discount. Conversely, if they are a high value customer, they probably do not want to see any discounting at all. And if you're able to identify a lot of different things about a consumer, you can communicate a lot of different things about your brand. So you're talking about the fact there is a VIP group, you're talking about the values of your business, you're talking about community projects your company might be involved with, and all of these things are deepening brand equity. And deepening brand equity is expressed as incremental lifetime value over time, and that's what most businesses are after. So what you eventually see, if you're a consumer, is a very nuanced experience of that brand. And the rules of communication for one-to-one messaging as opposed to marketing are very different. They're the rules of communication. And the rules of good communication are to use what you're given in the order you're giving them. So you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should work like that. You should listen twice before you speak. You should say less things but more meaningful things, and most important, you shouldn't forget what's been said before. So the example of the pair of shoes that chase you around the internet after you bought them, the reason that is so jarring is because it shows that you don't matter to the brand. It shows that there is no relationship there. And just like in one-to-one communication, if you've suddenly forgotten your best friend's name, it's a weird experience. So you need to remember what's gone before and then build on that over time. And it's that communication over time and maintenance of a relationship that creates incremental return. So if you're messaging to a mid-funnel that's not going to buy immediately, if you're contributing to brand effect that's hard to measure, how do you see whether it's actually done anything versus what's going on at the moment? And the answer is to look at incremental return. So I'm guessing everybody knows what test and control is before I go into it. Yeah, so the issue with test and control in digital and digital media is that typically for most digital media partners, the margin of error has been higher than the incrementality claimed. And the reason for that are the reasons of why incremental testing works. You need to be able to put somebody in test and control, and that needs to be clean. Up until now, it's been very hard to maintain somebody in test and control because you don't know what devices they're using and you don't know whether they're in test and control at all. You need to be able to run test and control all the time. It needs to be run concurrently. So if you think about aspirin for a drug trial, they still do test and controls for those now, and they're still finding out new things about what aspirin does. If you've got a persistent ID, you can run incrementality tests all the time. So if seasons change, market entrants change, you can capture that as well. And the last point is that the test and control needs to be completely randomly generated. It's almost impossible for a human to generate a completely random test and control sample. And the way that we've solved that in Conversant is when we've won bids online, we actually automatically, through a technology, assign people in test and control, which is where they stay. Now, the reason that this matters is if you think about how media works or marketing works, if the only thing you're looking at is incremental return, if you're showing ads to the wrong people, if you're showing marketing to bots, if you're showing the wrong frequency, all of those things will damage incremental return. The only way to get the right result is to show the right message at the right time to the right person. So it basically solves a lot of the problems of marketing and e-commerce if it's done properly. The reason that matters is if the marketer can take something like this and validate the results, which was the kind of the final piece for Conversant, we basically pass all of that data to our partners so that they validate the numbers. It's not mediated through a proxy like an attribution platform. And if you know what those numbers are and you're confident that for every pound you're getting £4 back, that allows you to go to financial directors and ask for more money. It allows you to invest with intent, with an expectation of a specific return. So I've only got one case study, but it's a good one. So June London is somebody that we've worked with for the last 2 years in London. What we've done for June by messaging their audience over time, the messaged audience has increased in value by 64% against the non-messaged audience. That's an absolutely enormous achievement to have run with somebody off-site. Some of those people we've actually messaged for 15 months concurrently. The reason that's important is it's very hard to change behaviour. You need to do it over time. You need to communicate over time to achieve that. Some of the people within this audience didn't actually buy anything at all for 15 months, but it's very cheap to communicate through digital media one-to-one with an audience if it's just one person. So the returns were very, very strong in this instance. And then finally, we were able to make the audience we were messaging increase the conversion rate by 33%. So if you can take the ID that the e-commerce teams have, if you can take the personalisation skills that the e-commerce teams have, but you put that in front of individuals where they are when they want it, you can drive e-commerce metrics out there when you're not on site. And the advantage of that is that whilst the audience on an e-commerce site is finite, the audience out there is not finite. So you can generate real scale by communicating to people over time, not just when they're engaged with the brand. So happy to take any questions at the end if anyone would like to ask any. It takes a month to get set up with us normally. It only takes 3 months to get to the first validation. The sort of businesses that work with us are typically omni-channel businesses, so high street retailers, businesses that are very focused on growth, and businesses that have long buying cycles. So the ID solves a lot of the problems of the buying cycle. Does anybody have any questions for me at the moment? Yeah?
So what happens once you start shortening that buying cycle? So frequency goes up? If you've got a customer, say you're a Topshop, you'd assume that customer's going to buy with you over a year or 2 years if you maintain the relationship. So the buying cycle is as long as you have a customer relationship with you. As long as you can message them continually, but you're saying the right thing at the right time, there's no sort of, I'm just going to message them for a month, because there's a continual relationship. As long as you can evaluate where that relationship is, you can generate a return for yourself. Okay?
So I think what you're kind of advocating is that conversion rate optimisation potentially is a waste of time and money.
No, absolutely wouldn't say that. So I think personalisation, where it is one of the few ad technologies that's actually delivered on what it said it was going to within quite a short period of time. And you're seeing very strong returns from CRO optimisation or on-site personalisation. What my contention is that if you're using personalisation to create efficiency, eventually you run out of return. So if you change how you think about personalisation, and actually you can use it to deepen relationships, you can create new demand. If you can use the communication of demand and combine that with a communication of efficiency, then you're doing one-to-one integrated marketing, which is everyone's holy grail. Yeah. Yeah. So I think. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So that's how I think personalisation is done at the moment. You rely on the CRM file, which you might not have the right to market to. You're then looking at what's happening on site. That's a very, very limited audience, because most of the conversions are happening in store. But the business owns a transaction file that's got everybody's data in it. And actually, all businesses have enough data to market to. The problem's been they've not been able to solve identity. So they don't have enough identity at scale to market to those people. So it's all there inside businesses. I think the problem is that people are trying to join a DSP to a DMP to a data onboarder, and I have never heard of that ever working to more than 12% of an audience. The cost involved for all the consultants, it's not worth doing. Where Conversant has solved that is we've effectively built a one-to-one database. It's for the UK, it's over 30 million people. That's 3 times more than most onboarders have initially. So rather than try to build all of that, you kind of rent the ID, but then use that to market to.
So how do you tie up the, non-authenticated sort of transactions?
So if it's cash, then we can't do that. If it is on an e-receipt, we can't close the loop back into store. If you have got anything in there, loyalty programs, e-receipts, anything at all, then it's full closed loop reporting. If not, we can still message those people because we can create an ID. It's just we'll only see what we see. I don't know about you. I don't believe in geo as I don't think it's real. Like whether someone's walked past a store 100 meters away has got nothing to do whether they just bought something or not. Yeah, exactly. So I think what I'm trying to talk about, I'm advocating for identity resolution because that solves marketing and it solves measurement, and then you know what you're actually doing. And then the final piece is to measure for incrementality, because that puts that puts all of the onus on the marketing vendor, and it takes it away from the marketer who now knows what they're actually getting. Yeah, brilliant. So, just in summary, what Conversant is working to is, and we're advocating for marketing to one-to-one, so actually to an individual. Like if you have a higher understanding of what personalisation is, you can do better things with it. If you can identify somebody, you should respect that relationship, communicate less but communicate better, and then you should measure the performance of that to understand what the actual true return to your business is. Thanks very much.